Um, Welcome. My name is Julie Novic, and I am going to talk to you today about the benefits of ethical and trustworthy AI. I am a data scientist at a AI design and development firm out of Cleveland, Ohio called Pandata. And the first time I spoke about ethics and artificial intelligence in machine learning, I was speaking to a group of practitioners, mostly from STEM fields. And so I modeled my talk after the kind of really deep intellectual philosophical conversations that I've seen at conferences, and with a lot of detail about the specifics of the models that we're working with. And I was thrown in for a loop in the first 5 minutes of the conversation with a simple question: how can AI be unethical? It's just math. And at that moment, I realized we were coming from this question of artificial intelligence and ethics from two different perspectives, with different underlying assumptions that needed to be reconciled. And my assumption was that I assumed that the dangers and troubling aspects of artificial intelligence were common knowledge. And they were assuming that it's math, it's logical, it's devoid of bias, it's kind of pure in a lot of ways. And in the process of reconciling these two perspectives, we both got an education. So I wanted to start this talk with going over a little bit about what an unethical AI looks like. And so, yes, algorithms, machine learning, and AI are beautiful, elegant mathematical creations that take data, learn patterns, and provide insight into questions we have. But they're only as good as the data we feed them. And that's where the bias comes in. When the data that we use is biased and we don't take into consideration issues of privacy, the result can be putting our organizations at risk. And when people who need to understand and make decisions based off the data that is coming out of the AI, and they don't trust it, that puts our organizations and their missions at risk. And so what do I mean by at risk? Well, let's look at some cases of AI gone wrong. In 2018, Amazon scrapped an AI recruiting tool when they discovered that the tool had been discriminating against women. This, despite there not being any, references to the gender of the individual in the application being supplied to the AI during training or even when they were using it. So when analyzing the resumes, for some reason, the AI was giving women lower scores. Scores for being associated with things like women's soccer and other women-centric organizations. So why did it do that? Well, it was trained on historic data that itself was biased and that had a bias against women when hiring it. And the math wasn't biased itself. It was learning the biased information from the data that was coming in, that historic data. So humans created the biased data, gave it to this algorithm that was based on logic, and it logicked out the reasons why the bias was there. And so the goal that had been to create something that eliminated bias, that created a fair process, ended up exacerbating the problem. Then in 2019, an email product called Superhuman came under fire for violating privacy in its application of AI. Now, the idea behind this email application is to allow individuals to move quickly through their inboxes with the help of algorithms and shortcuts to make life easier. One piece of information that was maintained by the application was kind of a read receipt on steroids, where the sender could see the location of where the email was opened in addition to when. And that information in and of itself can be pretty not that dangerous, but in the wrong hands, it can be dangerous. You can have bad actors, such as stalkers, who are using that information to harass their victims, or worse. And that really wasn't the goal of the product, and nor was it what the product wanted to do. And my third example is the Gender Shades Project, information gleaned from the Gender Shades Project, which audited facial recognition software for its effectiveness against gender and skin color. The initial phase of the project found that for the three software providers they examined, the facial recognition algorithm had difficulty correctly identifying dark-skinned individuals, performing the worst on dark-skinned women. Good news is that after the study, those 3 providers revised their algorithm. They made it more fair. But their competitors, who had not been audited in this first round, were later exposed as having the same problems, not having learned the lessons from the initial round that these algorithms could be biased and that they need to check their data. In each of these examples, we have well-meaning organizations who are trying to meet a need in a way that is efficient and generates revenue. None of them set out to create a biased or dangerous tool, but the unintended consequences of not thinking about the implications of the work led to some serious problems. Currently, that impact of these kinds of missteps falls primarily in the realm of public opinion and damage to one's reputation, which in and of itself can be really devastating in terms of sales and revenue and adoption of products and services. But there's also the issue that when we're coming on a period of government regulations that are fast approaching, and so it makes sense for a savvy business or organization to think about in advance about ethics. So how do we do that? Well, this is where it gets a little thorny and complicated. There's currently no one shared definition of what it means to be ethical. Even in philosophy, ethics is a complicated beast to define. So for this talk, I will define ethics as being composed of 3 principles: transparency, privacy, and fairness. So transparency is understanding why the AI is producing the outputs that it is, so that you can make decisions based on those outputs with a clear understanding of what's going on. Privacy is focused on protecting the personal identifying information of the people who are sharing their data with you. And fairness, of course, is making sure that there's not bias and you're not having disparate impacts on the people that are affected by the use of this AI solution that you're creating. However, even in those concepts, it can get a little cloudy. One study presented over 40 different statistical definitions of the concept of fairness, and all of them were mutually exclusive. So a lot depends on the stakes and your organization's culture and philosophy. So since there's no one-size-fits-all solution to ethics, the first step is deciding what ethics looks like for your organization. This requires asking some key questions. Who do I impact and how? And are the stakes high and low? This looks at basically the impact that you're having, your solution is having. When you're working with a normally disadvantaged population, then what the impact of your AI solution has can be really devastating, as well as if it's a really high stakes event, like in the loan industry. Getting or not getting a loan can really change someone's life. And those are important things to be thinking about when designing your AI solution. Also, do your customers need transparency to feel comfortable about the AI associated with their product or service? For example, how many times have you seen a recommendation and you're like, how did that come up? Why is that coming up for me? And not understanding what reasons behind the recommendation, and maybe you start trusting the recommending service. Also, do your decision makers need transparency to feel comfortable about using the AI product, the data the AI product produces? So does it make sense? Is it going contrary to their learned experiential knowledge? And if so, what is the AI solution seeing that is different? And how might that help make better decisions in the process? What level of transparency do you need to show people? With that, do you need to show the nitty-gritty bolts of what the AI solution, how it's built, what it's producing, or simply explaining how the data, the output information it's providing comes to those conclusions is enough for the transparency issues? What are your data privacy concerns? What are the regulations that your business is beholden to? This can help you decide how you use data and in what ways you use data in your solution. And what does fair look like? For example, do you want all subsets of society to be equally represented in your customer base? Or do you want your customer base to reflect different distributions? Or maybe you do want to advantage one group for equity purposes. Understanding how fairness can be understood for your organization is important. And again, these questions, when you're answering these questions, diversity of thought can help really mitigate risk management, because when you have a diversity of thought, you have multiple perspectives of the same issue. You'll understand how things are impacting groups that may not belong to your population that you're a part of. And when I see diversity of thought, it's more than just having an equal gender balance or making sure that you have racial and ethnic diversity, but social and educational background diversity is important as well. You want to have as many different voices in the room to see every aspect you can of the situation in order to understand what possible risks, what possible unintended consequences might be happening. So once you've identified your organization's transparency, privacy, and fairness needs, that's perhaps the hardest part. The good news is that once that's done, there are many tools that can help you make sure those ethical needs are met. For example, if transparency about how an AI solution is making decision is key importance, your team can build an AI solution with interpretability in mind. These are called white box models, and they allow you to build trust in how your model makes decisions. In the absence of an interpretable model, say perhaps you've already built what's called a black box model, where you don't really have clear understanding of how the AI is producing its output, you can use post hoc methods that make the foundation of explainable AI, also called XAI. These methods use algorithms such as LIME or SHAP, which some links to those algorithms are available on the slide. You can use those algorithms to get at the specific decisions that are made for the specific data point. So why this decision was made in this case by the AI. Do you agree with it, and why or why not? And then the next issue is the privacy concern, where this is particularly a concern in healthcare and in the education fields with FERPA and HIPAA. And one key way of making sure that data is protected for privacy is to de-identify it before it can be used, removing all of the identifying information before you start building your AI solution with it. And also, when doing this, care needs to be taken to understand which variables allow you to reconstruct the identity of the individual. Looking at a data set and saying, how do I figure out who's in here? And can that be reconstructed or not? Because the more you cannot reconstruct an individual from the data, the better their privacy is kept. And perhaps the biggest concern to many organizations is mitigating bias and ensuring the fairness in their AI. The dangers of this is really to your reputation, and that can affect your loss of revenue. And there are many solutions to look at the data that's going into the AI solution. So it all starts with your data. The first step is to check to see if there's bias in your data to begin with. IBM's AI Fairness 360 has a lot of ways in which that can be done. That's not the only tool available out there. There are others, but that's one of the more popular ones. These tools can also help you modify your data sets to help make them more balanced so that you can use them in creating your AI. But maybe you already have built your AI and you want to understand, is there bias baked into this? Well, the simplest way of checking for that is to check to see if there are different success rates for the different population segments that you have. And that helps build awareness, which allows you to know what your next steps are. Do you want to redo this with more balanced data? Can you do a post hoc kind of correction? These are solutions that you can be thinking about once you understand whether or not your solution is already biased, if it's already built. So maybe your next question is, what projects benefit the most from ethical and trustworthy AI? And the short answer is all of them. However, if you need to focus your energy on a few projects, I recommend asking yourself some questions similar to the questions you asked when trying to decide what your business ethics were. What are the stakes? Who's going to be impacted? How are they going to be impacted? And does that impact your business? Does that affect your reputation? Does that affect whether or not your clients will trust you? And if that does, is that an acceptable risk? And if not, mitigate for it. The benefits of AI are many. Most important is maintaining your reputation as an organization. Not thinking about ethical and trustworthy AI can leave you open to some PR nightmares like the ones I described at the beginning of the talk. And this can lead to future regulations, liabilities from a legal perspective, and loss of revenue. But there's the added benefit that you have peace of mind. Most organizations aren't out there to do bad things. Most organizations have missions and purpose statements that are to do good in this world, to help people. And having the peace of mind that your organization is achieving the mission it's intended to do it without harming people, doing the least harm possible, is a benefit of trusted and ethical AI. There are some costs. There are costs in time and effort, which can slow down the initial launch of a AI solution. But the benefits far outweigh these costs in terms of protecting your reputation. And I'll leave you with that. And if there's any questions. So thank you. Thank you, Bill, for that comment. Any That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, the explanatory AI tools are really cool, and they have a lot of use. I think they're underutilized in business contexts. Um, any other questions or comments? So there was the Amazon example. There's another very popular example is the Compass recidivism AI tool. This was an AI tool that was designed to help courts be able to understand the chances of someone recommitting a crime. And it was used to try to help mitigate social risk, and it was unfairly having high risk individuals who are African American versus the or Caucasians. In practice, it was giving African Americans a higher risk score than someone who was of equal chance of recidivism that from other races. And so that was a problem, and I think they've been working on that. Do businesses create unethical AI on purpose? Now, that's a good question. I have not come across any research that indicates a business has purposefully created an AI that's unethical. A lot of times it comes from not thinking about the unintended consequences. The unintended consequences of not thinking through how this data might be biased, or how might this product be used, or what underlying proxy variables, the variables that might indicate race, gender, or other protected classes could be sharing information to that is being trained on that produces biased results. Political parties creating AI tools with bias on purpose. That's a good question. I think and I'm running out of time, so that is a good question. Uh, um, Thank you.